Welcome to Dial the Gate. My name is David Reed, and this is episode 31. We are very fortunate to have back executive producer and writer Joseph Mallozzi of Stargate SG-1, Stargate Atlantis, Stargate Universe. We will be bringing him in just a moment here. But first, before I do so, let me just go ahead and pull up some information here. If you enjoy Stargate and you want to share and see more content like this available on YouTube, please consider clicking that like button. And there is several options here for you available to submit information regarding this series to your friends and to anyone who's in your immediate sphere who is a Stargate fan. Please consider subscribing as well for future episodes, and we will be releasing new content every single week in the new year as well. So what's going to happen in this particular episode is I'm going to bring in Joe, and all my fonts are screwed. You know, if anything could go wrong in this episode, it absolutely is. Now all my fonts are screwed up. I appreciate Joe's patience. You know what? Let's just go ahead and bring him in here. Hello, Mr. Mallozzi.
Jeez. David, it sounds like, you seem to be having a rough day.
I am having an interesting morning. So I just found out how YouTube programs all of the live shows, and it depends on the computer's time zone. So unfortunately, you pulled the lucky number in me figuring this one out. So I really appreciate you working with me on this one here. So
no problem.
I have been looking forward to talking with you for a while about this particular season 5. For a very long time, it was my favorite. There was just...
Really?
Yes, because it had a mixture of everything that was really great about the show in it. And I think a large part of that is you were beginning to pull together threads. I mean, season 2 really started doing that, pulling threads from season 1, obviously. But season 5 had this perfect mixture of past threads and future story ideas all rolled into one season. And I think, you did a great job of introducing Anubis, and unfortunately, if I must be honest, a great job of killing off a lot of our allies.
Yeah, sorry about that.
How do you feel about SG-1 season 5, looking back on the body of work, your sophomore season?
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the mix because, I remember at the end of season 4, I think season 4 was a tough season for us because Paul and I were always, most of the stories we wrote were really, I think all of them were really one-off, self-contained stories that really had not that much to do with what had come before. And I remember at the end of the season, Paul and I sitting in my office, talking about season 5 and what the heck will we do for season 5, because we were so tapped out of ideas. We had, the cupboard was bare. But one of the things that we realized in season 5 was that rather than come up with those wholly original ideas, there was a wealth of previous stories to tap, and the mythology and the relationships that had been established in the previous 4 seasons. So that's why it made me think of that when you just said that the series was really a mix of a bit of old, a bit of new, it was just very varied storylines, and that's something we always loved about Stargate, the fact that we could tell different types of stories, not just tonally, but also in terms of having connections to the past mythology or something, introducing something completely new.
When you realized that you could tap into the resources that you had built into season 4 and tap into the resources that had been paved before you had arrived, what stories were you really interested in telling when that first became a possibility to you?
Off the top of my head, I don't really recall if there was a specific story, but I remember kind of doing the deep dive into. We were familiar with the show, obviously, before landing on season 4, and we've done our research, but we did more of a deep dive in between seasons 4 and 5, and specifically with regard to the mythology. So I mean that kind of appealed. I mean, the tomb was an interesting one in that, even though the connection to the past mythology was tenuous, still in kind of a big picture view, it was a great opportunity. And invariably it would always be a matter of, we would think about storylines, and I would always think, what about, how come we've never explored, and one of the things that fans kept on coming up with was, what about the Chinese? What about the Russians? Do they, are they in pursuit of their own gate program? So this was an opportunity to introduce a Russian team, which was kind of fun.
Yeah, that idea of just the Asgard mothership just bailing out into the Pacific Ocean really was the spawn. That incident at the end of season 3 really was the spawn of much. I mean, it leads to the Atlantis expedition. It leads to the IOA. That first initial exposure of the Russians to the Stargate program. And in season 5, we finally learn that they did their own thing, and it didn't go so well.
Yeah.
I want to get to the tomb in just a minute here, and I want to remind those who are in the YouTube audience, submit your questions for Joseph Mallozzi now. My moderating team is Ian today, and Ian, thank you for being there for us in there. The questions for Joe don't have to be about season 5, but my line of questions are today. You open up the season with a story by credit for Enemies. And this episode, it looks like, let's see who this episode, it says the writing credits, it says the teleplay was by Rob. Mm-hmm. So when a situation, okay, fill me in on the little story by teleplay thing, teleplay by thing. So the story came from all of you because...
No, it rarely happens, to be honest with you. Whenever you get in a room and you, as a group of writers, and you spin a story, whoever gets assigned the story writes the script. It's very, very rare. I mean, it does occasionally happen when someone just will come in with like a fully fleshed out idea and pitch it, and they'll get a teleplay credit. Usually that more often happens with a freelancer, when they'll come in and pitch an idea, and maybe they're not able to write the teleplay. In this case, it was actually a very interesting scenario, because I believe we spun this. We didn't even spin the story, but essentially Paul and I came up with the idea, and we wrote an outline. And we got notes, and one of the notes from Rob was, I forget what exactly it was, but in terms of the timing of something happening in the script. And so we went back and tried to address his note, and we weren't able to address it. He's like, no, you have to do this. And Paul and I grew frustrated, and we were like, you know what? You kind of have a firm idea of what you want to do, so why don't you write the teleplay? And so it was our story, because we had basically gone through various permutations, but Rob wrote the teleplay. And I have to say, what's interesting about the teleplay is that the note he gave that we were unable to accomplish was something that he realized when he was writing the teleplay either didn't make sense or he couldn't do. So
the same brick wall for him.
That's the story. So I completely forgot about that story. Until now you mention it, but that was the scenario.
I love this episode. This two-parter, Exodus and Enemies, are some of the best that you guys did. The Vorash sun explodes, and through a quirk of hyperspace travel, we find ourselves on the other side of the universe, and we're stuck with Apophis, and I think the more mortifying thing is that there are replicators that far out. So God knows how many galaxies they have absolutely just wiped out. I'm convinced if Universe had continued, we would have found more replicators. I think that just the fate of Earth would have just been always to encounter those guys at some point or another. Because, I mean, Rob Cooper pointed out with us, they're harmless fun and killing. You're like in a video game.
Exactly.
So, did you approach? I'm curious about this particular season when you sent SG-1 across the universe with Jacob in this lone mothership. Did you know that you were going to knock Apophis off in that first episode and have Teal'c go rogue and have replicators back? Or was this, what? Let's just put them at the corner of the universe. We'll deal with it next year. Now, somehow I doubt that last part.
Yeah, no, we usually have a pretty good idea of where we're going to go. I mean, it really depends on, it went from season to season in terms of how detailed we were in our game plan, but usually we would know where we were headed.
Okay. Yeah. And so what was it like having Apophis finally, truthfully, 99% be dead?
Yeah,
Main villain.
Yeah. I guess it didn't land with as hard enough on Paul and I as I'm sure everyone else, because we joined in season 4,
right?
And he, I forget, did Apophis even put in an appearance in season 4?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he did, but it was really minimal. It was only like 2 or 3 episodes.
Yeah.
So it wasn't.
So, but I mean, yeah, I mean, I don't believe it was something that we would have pitched, just because, he's such an established villain that Brad and Robert had laid so much groundwork for. But then again, I mean, in the back of my mind, I always assumed, as I always say, this is science fiction and no one ever stays dead in science fiction.
That's certainly true.
You stay dead for as long as, I'm out of ideas for your character. And then if I come up with like a brilliant storyline, then, all bets are off. But in the case of, although, I mean, Apophis did end up, even though he's dead, Peter did come back for several appearances later on down the line.
With certain sci-fi twist, Apophis Prime was basically gone.
Right. Yeah. But I mean, Peter was amazing in the role. I love the character of Apophis. And, the fact that we killed him off for good, shall we say, really was more sort of a reflection on the fact that we had so many other story lines, in the works, and so much other ideas to tap from the past. I mentioned the mythology that we had that freedom to kind of open things up.
I think that there is something delicious from a story perspective. I mean, it's insidious from a real life perspective, of course, but I think that there is something really delicious about Apophis always saying to Teal'c, more or less over the course of 4 or 5 seasons, when I get my hands on you, we think that he's gonna just keep killing him, and like a la Ball with O'Neill again and again. Instead, he turns him around, and it's like, whoa! Because I remember watching, I was like, well, I didn't expect that. Yeah. What was that?
Well, that's good. That's good.
Exactly. Was that subversion of the audience expectations? Ones that was like, well, you know what? If we're gonna go this far, if we're gonna go in this direction, let's at least have Apophis go out having done something that affects Teal'c in at least the next episode. Yeah. I mean, definitely, you always want to subvert our audience expectations, and often it's very hard to do. But in this case, you would think, what is the most impactful thing that our villain can do? And obviously, it's something that would have not necessarily lasting consequences, but consequences, as you said, beyond that episode, and the fact that it would affect one of our regulars so deeply, and as a result, end up affecting those he cared about. So I don't remember who came up with that idea. It was either Brad or Robert, but it was just really a terrific little twist. It wouldn't surprise me if it was Brad, because of just what he does with it. He makes a meal of that. Brad does in Threshold. What an extraordinary hour of television.
Yeah.
Chris and Tony still talk about that one to this day.
Oh yeah.
It was so cool seeing their backstory, because in season 5 of like any typical other show, even to this day, you'd be like, season 5, we're kind of finally getting to the backstory, the significant backstory of how Teal'c became a rebel. And boy, do those actors eat it up. And there's some marvelous scenes between those guys in that show.
Yeah, and poor Chris having to lie down shirtless in the snow.
Exactly. His poor nipples are so frozen in his back. Oh gosh, that was so funny. But I love this opening show in that it also subverts our expectations about seeing the replicators this quickly again. And the visual effects, at least the movement of the camera. Martin Wood, it appears, at this point, has never had more freedom to just run backwards through the hallway with SG-1.
Yeah.
Replicators coming around all corners, and it looks, at least for the time, it still holds up pretty well today, but it looks so good.
Is that the episode where he brings them into the elevator and the doors? Yeah.
Right. We get to see what happens when you use the ring transporters. That whole sequence is one of the best in the entire franchise. So just
I mean, it's funny actually. I just did a kind of a video panel with Martin Wood on Monday, and I mentioned the fact that he was our action go-to guy, and he just tore it up.
It was a great show and a solid entrance into a brand new season of television. You went on to do The Fifth Man.
Yes.
Dion Johnstone.
Yes.
One of the best recurring actors that you guys had.
Absolutely.
Where did the idea for The Fifth Man come from?
That was an idea that Paul pitched, and I remember he pitched it in the room, and then Brad was like, "This is, I think, similar to an episode of Star Trek." And I mean, I
think Conundrum.
I was familiar with the original Star Trek. Like I never got into Next Gen just because I found the uniforms didn't fit right. It's an odd thing to basically be turned off by. I was like, look kind of good.
You do have to stare at him a lot.
Yeah, but Brad watched it, and so we're like, okay. He's like, as long as it's, we do our own thing,
right?
Because that would always be the case. We would always pitch something and be like, either we did it in seasons 1 to 3, or Star Trek already did it. So it was very rare we would find something that was not, it was something totally original. But this, apparently the basic premise had echoes of the Star Trek episode, but of course we made it our own. And you're absolutely right. Dion is a fantastic actor who, comes back later as an Unas, and just one of Vancouver's very best.
We had the privilege of talking with him on Gate World a few years ago, and he just ate up the roles that you guys created for him. It was so we rarely get exposed to non-humanoid species this early on in SG-1. And I remember the Riol, in talking with Bruce Woloshyn, was one of Rainmaker's first chances to do a creature. And it was one of the more exotic ones that you guys did. And it's a really, really great technical achievement, and also just a really cool sci-fi idea that you've got this species that makes... If it's near you, you are manipulated into thinking that it's an ally. It's an interesting camouflage idea.
Yeah.
And it was a powerhouse for Rick. Rick had some great scenes with Dion.
Yeah. Actually, 5th season was this, and I think Red Sky is follows soon after. Are two of Rick's greatest, I think, performances on the series, and they happen. To occur back to back.
They do indeed. And Red Sky was written by Ron Wilkerson.
Ron,
was that so? Ron, I don't see that name come up very much. Was that someone who pitched an individual episode, or how does that?
We were always looking to add to the staff, but it was always a very tricky show to get. I mentioned before the fact that it was really not a reflection on one's skill as a writer. You either get it or you don't. I mean, for instance, I watched The Queen's Gambit recently on Netflix, and I was like, that's a great show. I personally would not be the guy to be in that writer's room. But I thought it was terrific. But it's the same way with Stargate. We would reach out and try out writers. More often than not, they just didn't work out. In the case of Ron, I believe, I don't know how he came to us, but he pitched, and I think maybe Red Sky was his pitch. I think he went through the same process that we did with our first episode. That we pitched the idea, they liked it, we talked it through, he wrote the outline, we gave notes on the outline, and then he delivered a first draft that we thought was strong enough to warrant acceptance into the cabal. So he delivered on that and became a part of the writers' room for the 5th season. And yeah.
Okay, so you recall him being there for the full 5th season?
Oh yeah.
Okay, definitely. I'm gonna want to reach out to him for sure.
Yeah,
I
just remember actually the one Ron story I do remember is actually later in the season. He came in and he was having a really tough time with one of the episodes, one of the scripts, and I don't know what it was, but we were in Rob's room and we were talking, and he had a script down on the couch, and then John Lennox, who was our line producer, his dog came in, jumped up on the couch, and peed on Ron's script. And Ron jumps up and shouts, John, your dog's peeing all over my script. And Rob followed up with, well, in all fairness, we've all been doing that.
God, jeez, man.
True story.
Oh gosh. His writing credits for season 5, Red Sky, Between Two Fires, Proving Ground, and The Sentinel.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, man. Oh man. So the next one that you guys put out was The Tomb.
Yes. That was a lot of fun.
Repurposed Gould sets. Yeah. So actually, well, not exactly, but like the bricks and the tunnels were built like them.
Yes. So, not exactly repurposed, but certainly
in the space.
Visually, yes, very similar.
Claustrophobic episode,
I love really that
creepy show. Talk about The Tomb.
As I mentioned, we just came up with the idea. More often than not, the story ideas come about as a result of questions like, why haven't we learn more about what the Russians are up to or the Chinese are up to? Are they aware of the Stargate program? What steps are they taking towards acquiring technology? And so we introduced this Russian team. And it's interesting, one of the actors, Jennifer Hawley, and I mentioned this in season 4, she auditioned for the role of a character who originally in the script was titled Jennifer Hawley, and then my writing partner changed it because he said, Jennifer Hawley sounds like a nonsense name. It should be Jennifer Haley. And but an actress named Jennifer Hawley auditioned for that particular episode, didn't get the role. So I thought of her because I
was
I
meant
loved her
to be.
audition. Yeah, so we brought her back, and she was in The Tomb.
And you introduce Colonel Chekhov in this episode as well. Gary Chalk, fantastic
amazing
actor.
He is terrific.
He only has one scene at the end of the show. When you create these characters, are you sometimes surprised at their longevity in the long term? It's like, man, I didn't think we'd get this much mileage out of this guy, but in the scheme of things, he just fit the bill.
It always occurs. I mean, the best example of that, I think, is Robert Picardo's Woolsey.
Yes,
a character who's introduced as really just kind of a thorn in SG-1's side. And then, you can't help but love Bob and his portrayal. And so the Woolsey character starts off as just a pain in the butt, and then slowly over time transforms into, kind of a more kind of amusing character to the point, and then ultimately after he takes over command of the Stargate of the Atlantis expedition, kind of redeem him, and so his character almost comes, I want to say full circle. It's more like 180, really.
It's like what you guys did with McKay.
Yes. That is actually the best example.
You don't want to get rid of his edge. His edge is still there, but at the same time, he's someone that you can at least, from not being able to tolerate being in the room at all to being like, you know what, I accept these character flaws of you because you're such a great asset to the team.
Yeah. And honestly, you get to know them. You get to see the other side, and so really the side that you were introduced to in the beginning is still there, but you kind of qualify those annoyances, if you will.
Absolutely. And Gary's with Colonel Chekhov is one that eventually gets his due by blowing up aboard the Korolev.
Right. Well, yeah.
Whose idea was it? And I think it's still officially the worst way to go. Getting put inside of a sarcophagus with a creature that wants to and is actively eating you and feeding off of you while the sarcophagus is trying to keep you alive.
Yeah, I don't recall. I mean, it was either Paul or I, but I remember thinking, you're absolutely right. That is,
I can't think of a worse way.
The worst way to go.
Prolonged pain.
Yes, that is absolutely the worst way to go.
And that the Gould would think, okay, you know what? I'm just going to have to jump ship and just go ahead and go inside of a lower. I mean, the Gould can take other creatures as hosts if they have to. They just choose not to. So that was also creepy as well. That it's suggestive that these things could be in anything.
Yep.
So, and what a cool creature. Ken Rebel did a wonderful design on that.
Yes.
Squid-like and spider-like.
I do. I've always liked the squid-like elements or characteristics of alien creatures, whether it's Geiger's Alien or the kind of stuff we did on our show. I mean, it wasn't just this, but various
Time.
Yeah,
the squid's there. So, and then Taylor eats something similar in Missing.
Yeah.
So,
Space Gopher.
That's right. Desperate Measures.
Oh yeah.
This is an episode where we posit, what if a person with unlimited resources and knowledge of state secrets like the Stargate program, what if he had the ability to get a hold of a Gould to save his own life? What ends would you go to manipulate a situation and take advantage of other human beings, capture them, imprison them, study them, to extend your own life?
Yeah. One could almost ask, what desperate measures would one take to prolong one's life? Yes.
There's a sick yet and twisted yet darkly sympathetic quality to this character in Bill Merchant's Adrian Conrad.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think it's only fitting, when he does become a Gould, that, it ends as badly as it does for him. I was trying to figure out how to. No, let's go for the full way here. And that you're again going back on a previous story arc with Carter and Jolinar. Did that episode turn out in any way that you didn't expect? I mean, and it also continues the ongoing story, the ongoing adventures of Harry and Jack.
Yeah. I mean, I love that relationship, and it was always a pleasure to write those two, and they would have like a sort of Tom and Rick would always have a really good time playing off each other. In terms of the show, actually, I think the episode pretty much, delivered on what we imagined, except for the fact that we ended up something ridiculous, like 30 seconds short. So there's that sequence when they're searching the hospital that seems to go on for maybe a little too long. Maybe would you say 30 seconds too long? But otherwise, I think it turned out pretty well.
I always wonder. Sometimes there are episodes, and it's rare, this early on in Stargate, but in a lot of like more modern shows, there are episodes that have that are built back to back, and one of the advantages of having a serialized story is that you can go back and retell certain parts of it again. I always wonder if that's secretly, a time saving or time extending technique where, we really didn't actually film this much. So let's actually show a little bit more of this past episode because it actually does have to do with this plot, and fill in that time so that we can hit the minute mark that we need to.
It rarely happens, but
okay.
I'm sure it does happen on occasion.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wormhole X-Treme.
Oh, yeah.
Willie Garson returns.
Yes.
As Martin Lloyd. And, it's the 100th episode bash.
Yeah.
What was that atmosphere like, hitting that milestone at the studio? And, up in at Bridge Studios, not MGM.
Yeah, no, I mean, obviously it was very exciting. Paul and I joined in the fourth season, so again, it wasn't as impactful for us, but I mean, it was obviously like a huge deal for everyone. And, we consider ourselves fortunate to be able to write the 100th episode. But again, even though Paul and I wrote it, we were all in the room, and you just can't help but have fun with this particular episode. And I think on one of my blogs or multiple blog entries, I just kind of went over all like the in-jokes that pepper this episode. There's a lot of them, and all the cameos. I remember we made Ken Cohen was vice president of MGM Television. We gave him a cameo because I think he wanted a cameo. And we gave him the line. I think he's about to get into like a car, and his line is something like, "What this show needs is the sexy female alien." And we gave him that line because in season 4, that's one of the things that he pitched. In fact, that's I think an exact quote from him. He was like, "What this show needs," and then I got to express outrage about the fact that. There were no donuts left at the craft services, and Raw played kind of a harried writer. Rob Cooper played a harried writer.
Just do it the way it was in the script.
Yeah.
Oh, DeLuise was great in that. Yeah. So, Peter was an actor first, I believe.
Yeah.
I'm a huge Sequest fan here. And it was so the franchise always, SG-1 in particular, it really seemed like a DeLuise tour de force, because you had pretty much everyone in that family except for Peter's mother, as far as and the kids, their grandkids in that show. They brought in Michael to play Jack O'Neill's part.
Yeah.
And we had what was it like having Willie Garson back?
I love Willie in Point of No Return, and so it's great to have all these funny ideas, similar to 200, where everybody's spinning ideas, but you need some sort of a framework to hang all these ideas off of, and then Willie became the guy, and he became the guy in 200 as well, and he's just a great comic actor. And just really great timing, and really got along well with Rick, and so it was just it was a pleasure to have him back, and it just again once again, if you can pay off something that has come before, the fans really appreciate.
Absolutely. This season was the last season that you were on Showtime. Mm-hmm. So throughout the season, you guys were, I imagine, like in your headspace preparing, to be unemployed and be out there at the breadline again.
This was going to be it. This was the end.
When was I'm preempting this a little bit here, but when was the pickup for season 6 realized? Were you still in production of season 5?
We were still in production.
You were.
I remember walking, Brad calling us into the office, and he was like, "What would you guys think about a season 6?" And we're like, "What? How is that possible? I thought we're only doing 5 seasons on Showtime." He's like, "Well, apparently Sci-Fi has picked the show up for a 6th and final season." So we're like, "Oh, well, great. We receive a reprieve. So we'll do one more season." And Brad was like, "Look, but this is it. It's great. So, let's make the most of it."
You're going throughout the season, and as far as, we do say, there was always like a movie plan. There was always a movie in the works, but yeah. I was, from my knowledge, reading the news articles and everything else that were published at that time, the intent was to do some kind of a feature at the end of season 5, because you're setting up Anubis. You weren't just going to end the show and have Anubis out there. It was going to be some kind of a lost city, kind of beginning to pull the pieces together from Solitudes and that gate that was found at the Arctic and the Antarctic rather. And you're systematically eliminating our allies throughout this season. Was that a mandate going into season 5 to make Earth as isolated as possible?
I don't know if it was necessarily a mandate. As you said, we were working towards a series finale. And, if in working towards a series finale, you just kind of want to wrap up as many storylines as possible. And Stargate had so many ongoing storylines that you were never going to wrap them all up in satisfactory fashion. And you're absolutely right. There was always, the thought of doing a movie, but a full season is even better. So I forget at what point in the season we realized we were coming back. But obviously the finale, Revelation, was written as a season finale rather than a series finale.
When Meridian was conceived, was that with knowledge that Michael would not be joining for season 6?
Yes, to the best of my knowledge, that was the case. That is exactly what I thought of when you just mentioned the fact, when did we know? And yes, the fact that he decided to leave. I remember he had the conversation with Brad, and Brad was like, "Well, the door is always open if you want to come and play." So, remembering that leads me to believe that, but at the point we were writing Meridian, we knew we were coming back.
Okay. Yeah. And it's one of the reasons that I think those last few episodes are so delicious as well, because you've now boxed us in story-wise to a brand new threat and circumstances. And, but before I get to Revelations, fail-safe. So how many stories in the universe have been done about asteroids coming and wiping us out?
Exactly.
What gave you ideas? You know what we haven't done? It's an asteroid story. And to make it as unique as it was.
This is the point in the series where Paul and I began to write separately. So up until this point, we had always written together in the room, and although we always shared credit, he tended to write more of the rewrites, uncredited rewrites on other writers, and I tended to write more of the originals. But at this point in the series, we were actually writing separately. So I believe I wrote Summit and he wrote Failsafe at this time. And then we ended up co-writing Revelations. But this was one of those instances where I remember we were actually writing 2 separate scripts just because, I think it was just because the production machine had eaten up all the existing scripts, and we just desperately needed scripts.
And, well, in this example of you know what, failsafe. I don't know why I went to failsafe first, but it's reversed on IMDb. Let me go back to Summit, because Summit and Last Stand is where the idea of failsafe comes from. Because Anubis threatens to with the System Lords to destroy Earth before they reintegrate him into their group.
Yeah.
Summit and Last Stand.
Yes.
Long standing for a long time. My favorite episodes of the show.
Yeah, fantastic.
You have the Real Chemical, the Tok'ra, the Gould System Lords. You have you returning. There's like 5 or 6 disparate elements in that first episode that come together and are responsible. Go ahead.
Absolutely. No, those are the type of stories I love. The ones that you said with the disparate storylines that end up dovetailing in the end. I mean, they're very tough to do, but if you pull them off, they are the most dramatically satisfying. I think for fandom as well, they seem, they always respond to the type of stories that seem to juggle a lot of ongoing storylines and find a way to sort of pay them off in satisfactory fashion.
Well, it almost feels like with Summit and Last Stand, you are moving the whole frickin' mythology forward in that one show. I mean, the Tolan are gone at this point, like the Nox and I guess a few of the other, like more incidental, frankly, races at this stage are not involved, but really all the big pieces of the show, except for maybe the Jaffa, are moved forward in those 2 episodes in important ways. And
this is the episode where I believe we introduced Ball. And in a way, sort of that was the intent, was to sort of kind of open up the. I always love the System Lords, but to kind of open things up in terms of the System Lords, and he was one of, I think, about a half dozen System Lords we introduced in the episode, and Cliff really popped his performance, and he just became in time my favorite System Lord to write for.
What do you think?
Kind of that acerbic sense of humor.
Yeah, exactly. What do you think is it that about his performance that really stands out? There is a menace to him in that initial episode that carries into Abyss. Yeah, and there's he's just a great character all around. I wouldn't necessarily call him a mustache twirling villain per se, but he does have that murky kind of, I don't know what he's going to do next quality to him.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as you said, menace, but there's also something kind of humorous, devilishly humorous about his performance, which I always liked. And, we mentioned the fact that I always liked the humor in Stargate and the opportunity to take advantage of that. So he was a System Lord who you could play with that humor and have him get his, get decked by Carter or, in a later episode. And like I said, I mean, Cliff was amazing. I mean, obviously a terrific actor, but he also was able to deliver on the humor, which was always important to me.
What was it like getting to bring Osiris back? Anna-Louise Plowman, my favorite.
Yes, actually, she made such an amazing villain. I mean, the only issue I think was the fact that she was in the UK, so it made scheduling difficult. Otherwise, I'm sure she would have been all over that series. But it was terrific to have her back, and another fantastic performer.
She has a layer that she's playing throughout that. Yeah, some of the performers behind the Gould really get to play up that duality. If you look at Alexis Cruz, Alexis is playing that layer of, it's not always fully Chlorel. Skara is also kind of always there, pushing and pushing and pushing. And I think part of what I'm doing is, ignoring the fact that in that case we happen to know both symbiote and host, And
Yeah.
in the case of Sarah Gardner and Osiris, we do know symbiote and host. But when she talks about Daniel and when she, interacts with him and deals with him in that episode and in Revelations later when she finds out that he's dead, she's stunned,
Yeah.
And that's, if it was just a mustache, if it was just a evil, villain, I want him to be dead, it would be a completely different response. But there's layers of subtext in Osiris's, in Anna-Louise's performance.
Yeah. Yeah. And, like I said, there's just, you write a role and you cast to the best of your ability. And every so often you'll have a performance that just pops and that, this is a character you want to bring back. And, after The Curse, we thought definitely she's a character. By the way, I keep on saying the UK, but I think she's from New Zealand, or maybe she wasn't. I think she was in the UK. I think she was originally from New Zealand.
Right. I think that's correct.
Yeah.
And Dame Maggie Smith's daughter-in-law.
Oh, really? I did not know that.
Her husband is Toby. I can't remember his last name, but Maggie Smith's son. So he's the one. He's lost in space. He's Robinson.
Oh,
so yeah,
did not know that. Nice trivia.
Right, exactly. So, Revelations introduces the Asgard genetic flaw. Whose idea was this?
Again, it was either Brad or Robert. And again, you're always looking to subvert audience expectations, or kind of throw those curveballs at, given our established mythology, given our established characters. And this is a huge one with regard to the Asgard. Like I said, and it certainly was not Paul or I. It was an idea that was so big and would have had such an impact that it really had to have been either Brad or Robert.
It's a rare story that takes 5 years to unfold, from this to the end of the series. Yeah. And it's a tragic one. It was tough losing those little guys in the end. And I always wish that we had gone back to Janet Fraser, Terrell Rothery's performance as Heimdall. Was Heimdall a character that you, in hindsight, would have revisited if you had the chance?
I think so. I always like the Asgard, Thor, obviously, but who's the Asgard we had on Atlantis?
That was Hermione.
Yeah, Hermione was neurotic. He was a bit sassy, He's kind of like passive aggressive, and he was kind of fun to write for. But just in general, yeah, I absolutely loved the Asgard and
Trevor Duvall played Hermione and Visir.
Yeah,
Visir was cool too. I kind of like Visir.
Yeah, if we could have actually had, there was another one with kind of a sense of humor. I think he was. What episodes did he produce? Was he in Ripple Effect?
Yeah, he was.
Or no? Yeah, that was Visir. I remember because I always tended to write the sassy. The sassy Asgard, and so Ripple Effect was mine. And I remember when he was like, "Yeah, well, good luck," and just kind of beams out. So
that's right. Well, good luck to you all.
Yeah, good luck to you all. Yeah.
But to be fair, he is there when the Ori come through and start blowing everybody up. I think he does also duck out too, because he survives.
Yeah.
For the season, there was something always tongue in cheek about the Asgard, especially when they start making start interacting with us more. That scene, I don't know if it's Rick or who it is, and you have to wonder about these little timings on set, because both the puppet in Revelations, the case, the puppet, the CG character, and then the live actors have to be in on it as well. There is a shot where Rick holds out his hand. And you see Heimdall look down at it and start holding his hand out as well, and it's a tight on Rick, and his hand is like being shaken like this, as if the performer off screen is actually doing that. Is that something that Rick was really good about saying, just like, go with this, just bring it in tighter on me? Or was that little details like that written into the script more often than not?
No, to be honest, I mean, there was what was written in the script, but really when you get to set, it's, we defer to our visual effects supervisor. It's just sort of, and working in conjunction with the director. Usually the director would be like, can we do this? Can we do that? And accordingly. Of course, Rick's contribution had a lot to do with it. For instance, I remember sort of Rob and Brad were always fond of saying that, you would establish our force fields, our invisible force fields, but we would know there was a force field because we would script in a shot direction where the actor would run their hand across it, and you would see it come up and be like, $1,000. But of course, you would script like, you would do it once, but Rick, of course, on the day would always be like,
be playing with it.
2,000, 3,000, 4,000.
And had a fair way of enjoying blowing through the ammunition budget.
Oh yeah, yeah, of course.
I can't imagine that was cheap. That artillery.
Yeah, I'm just talking about it just recently. The fact that our offices, the writers' offices, the production offices, were in this fairly old brick building right above the set, and whenever they would fire off their weapons, our offices would shake. Yeah. So pleasant memories. I mean, at the time, I'd be like, holy, is it an earthquake? And then I realized, oh, actually, no, they're downstairs. They're just shooting up the SGC. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Oh man, what? Oh, what? It would have to put a smile on your face. It's like, look where I'm getting to go to work.
yeah. It was never dull. Never dull.
Man. So season 5, one of the best seasons of the show. You're really at a crossroads with a lot of the story elements. The ancients really, I think, begin to come into their own. You had a wonderful guest performance with Sean Patrick Flannery, who unfortunately wasn't able to join you again for season 9. But there's some good stories in this sophomore year of yours, my friend.
I mean, it's been a while since I've reviewed, but I mean, I in preparation, obviously, for our little chat, I kind of went over a few of the episodes for the season, and it was, I will have to say, it was a strong season. It was like a fun season, great performances, and as you said, storylines that really, push our, kind of the various arcs forward, the relationships of our arcs, the kind of the story arcs. You mentioned the Asgard. And the Goa'uld. I mean, I love the fact, season 5 was the introduction of Baal, who would, come to be a fan favorite in time.
It's just a good year. And, it's, I think one of the reasons that I think the franchise, that season is, I think, one of the reasons that I think the series itself remains as strong as it does to this day. I have, sorry, I was going to say one more topical point that someone pointed out to me was season 5 was also the year of 2001, in which the Ashen offer us a nefarious vaccine. This at a time when vaccines are very much in the news. This is true.
So that's kind of interesting. Yeah.
2001 being the episode title of that season, and it's the sequel to 2010, which was in the previous year. September 11th, you were in production on Menace.
Yes.
And is that a pupper?
Yes. Hang on just a second.
No, you're fine.
Okay. She is. Hi. She just wants to say hi.
Hello.
Yes, she is.
Hi.
She's looking for mom, who's in the other room practicing her Chinese. Okay, you okay?
You
I can't
good?
give you anything. Let's just
You be a
relax
good
here.
little girl.
Okay. Old timer. All right.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Those can be the best. So, when the attack had started, were you at the studio yet?
No. I remember my sister calling me, and I think it was like 7 a.m., 7:30 a.m. My time, and she was like, "Are you watching the news?" And I was like, "No." She's like, "Turn on the news," and that's how I learned. At that point, I mean, obviously production had sort of was underway, and I came in, and there were TVs or televisions in the boardroom that we would sometimes use to sort of screen episodes, and CNN was on, and anyone who was basically not on set was basically glued to the TV. And I remember sort of Brad having the discussion, and we ended up, I think we ended up shutting down that day. You know, it was tough. And I remember actually sort of also the actress who played Reese.
Danielle Nicolette.
Yeah, lovely, an amazing actress and just kind of a lovely person. She was unable to fly back to LA just because, you know, all
traffic was stopped.
Everything was grounded, and having to sort of stay, you know, those extra few days. But it was just, I mean, you know, that Menace and I think Warrior. I think we were prepping the Warrior, but yeah, those were the two productions that I remember were kind of impacted at the time.
I can't imagine how easy or hard that would be to, because I remember being in those offices and looking at that production board and just seeing everything lined up. Is it a situation where you just, guys, it's one of these calls where we have to just call this day a wash and everything gets adjusted down 1 day or 2 days?
Absolutely. That's what we have to do. I mean, usually there are contingencies in place. But, you know, productions are such like a well-oiled machine that, I mean, you've booked locations down the line, and it's really like Jenga. You pull out that one piece and the entire structure is in danger of collapsing. So at that point, it's really up to your first AD to reschedule, juggle, and make sure everything works.
Yeah. Just a lot of phone calls, I bet.
Yeah.
A lot of phone calls. But I mean, at that point, you know, and it's like now, I'm sure is, I mean, especially with the film and television industry, makes September 11th look like a freaking square dance, you know, with what's happened with COVID. Yeah, Christopher Judge talked about, you know, how somber it was on set and how apparent it was fairly quickly that even if we shoot, we're probably not going to get anything usable.
Yeah, so exactly.
Terrifying situation for everybody.
Yeah.
I have fan questions for you, but thank you for answering that. I've always been curious about what it was like going on upstairs. So, Tracy wanted to know. I'd like to know if there is any particular storyline you would like to have expanded upon, given a chance with any of the Stargates moving forward. If there was any particular thread that you left that was like, you know what, if I could go back and.
There are so many of them. I mean, the obvious ones are, frankly, for me, the Destiny, picking things up for them on the other side of the Great Expanse. Although, you know, of all the endings, even though I know fans felt like they were left hanging, I thought there was sort of an elegance to the universe ending in that, you know, that final shot of Destiny jumping, leaving us behind, and the fact that we don't know. I mean, in all likelihood, they're still in stasis and they'll outlive us all.
Yeah, quite possibly.
You know, I very much would have loved to have seen Atlantis get back to the Pegasus galaxy. That is actually one of the bigger ones for me. You know, in terms of SG-1 and storylines, you know, I always felt that there were ball clones kicking around. So
really,
he was
still,
a character. Yeah, oh, absolutely. It would have been fun to sort of go back to him. You mentioned the Asgard, and earlier we talked about the fact that no one ever stays dead.
Right.
There
are still Asgard bodies floating around in the universe.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, I am sure I could go through, and list like dozens of storylines I would have loved to have seen.
This is ultimately, I think, going to be a yes or no answer, but I'm interested to see just how far it was developed. The story with Stargate Extinction, it was suggested that it wasn't going to be a conclusion to the Wraith, but rather an expansion to their story. Is that a fair? I just need to sit down and read it.
Yeah, don't you have the script?
I do, but I want to. I never touched it because I wanted to see it first. So you know what? But the more that we talk about it, it's like the more I don't want to see it because I don't want to be put in a position where I'm like I am against the audience and having more information.
Well, really, it was intended to either be a movie or the opening to two-parter for season 6. Okay. But really, all it was designed to bring Atlantis from Earth back to Pegasus, and they have an adventure along the way. And Todd happens to be along for the ride. Right. So I mean, it's not really. There's nothing really Wraith specific outside of the Todd character.
Okay.
But you'll have to read it and let me know what you think.
I think, just dangle it in front of the audience.
Yeah.
I really loved scene 32. It just really hit home, man.
Mm-hmm.
Let me rephrase this then. Mm-hmm. Was the end game for the Wraith, like the end game for the Gould and the Replicators and all that, ever determined in like an initial framework concept? Like, so that were Atlantis to ultimately end, mm-hmm. you knew where you were going to go with that species. Because even in my argument, when people say that they need more Atlantis, I mm-hmm. think largely what they're saying is that they want a conclusion to the biggest arc of that show, which is mm-hmm. you've got this vampiric, life-sucking species running around out there in the Pegasus mm-hmm. galaxy, mm-hmm. and their story wasn't resolved. Did you have... Obviously, you had intent to resolve it, but were the bones in place? Did you know what you were going to do?
I would say Brad and Robert certainly, as the creators of the series, would have had an end game in mind, but we were not actively working towards that conclusion because, in all honesty, I thought we were coming back for a 6th season.
Yeah. Okay, that's fair. That makes a lot of sense. Ian wants to know. Mm-hmm. How long did it take roughly, depending, I mean, if you like put all the seasons together and mm-hmm. and visual effects and everything else, how long did it take roughly from when your first draft was written to when you had a completed story ready for air?
It really depended on what point in the production schedule and how quickly you had to write. But I would say usually it would take a couple of days. You come up with an idea, you take a couple of days to spin. You have maybe outside of a week to write your outline. Usually maybe it takes a few days. And then once, you'll do like a rewrite of the outline and get notes on that. That's maybe a couple of days. First draft will take you 2 weeks approximately. And then each subsequent draft, usually maybe a week or so. So I would say about a month and a half to 2 months from idea to shoot ready, production white.
Okay. And how long would it take? Let me see here. I want to try to figure out how I want to phrase this. You know what? Let me come back to that. Okay. So, Martin Lloyd, Carlos Takeshi wanted mm-hmm. to know, is Martin Lloyd based on traits of anyone in particular from inside your writer's room, a composite?
Not really. To be honest with you, he was kind of more composite of kind of the more extreme kind of fandom voices we would come across, and he begins as kind of like this weird kind of conspiracy theorist, and then kind of progresses into kind of a more lovable ally. But no, there was not. I mean, you would think that he would be one of us. But in fact, no. When we were writing it, we did not very much of Martin Lloyd in any of us, or vice versa.
I remembered when I wanted to ask you earlier, when you were in production for a show, at what point? Because I remember going and visiting you guys in production. I think it was production of season 10. And season 3, and Martin Garrow was in his office with his soundproof headphones on, his head down, writing away, and it always made me wonder. Obviously you're not doing that 24/7, or at least 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. At what point was the creation process for an episode the most intense? Like when you're actually sitting down and hammering out that first draft script. Where you looked at the forecast and was like, okay, on these episodes, on these days up ahead, I am unreachable because I have to get the thing out.
First of all, I have to correct you in your saying you're not working 24/7. In fact, as writers, you're always writing. I mean, I would write when I'm driving. I would write when I was in the shower. I would write when my significant other would be talking to me over dinner, which is why I ended up getting divorced. So as a writer, you're always writing. And, as I mentioned, we were always very careful about trying to get as many scripts production ready before the first day of principal photography, so that we were never scrambling. But of course, invariably, the machine eats up those scripts, and you have to get right down to it. And I think there are varying degrees of intensity. There's the intensity of the writer's room, in which case basically you're dealing with disparate opinions and trying to sort of make a story work. There's the kind of the intensity of, once you have the outline approved, is getting that script written. And everyone has a different process. Martin, as you said, exactly, would put on the soundproof headphones and just get right down to it. I would always have to pace, and people would notice. Like I would always I would write a scene, I would print it up, and then I would pace the halls and go over the scene, revise it, and then use that as almost kind of a running start into the next scene. Paul would be the same way as Martin. He would close the door in his office, open up his bottle of scotch, and
get to work.
Get to work.
Jeez.
I just see Rob every once in a while, and I come to his office. He'd be just kind of staring at a screen, and he basically, suddenly just kind of a little flurry of of tapping, and then it would kind of fade, and he would just kind of stare at the screen for a while. Just everyone had a different way.
So did you all have your own signals one another, and when you were not to be disturbed?
Usually the closed door was a good signal.
Okay, I was gonna ask.
That was the signal. Yeah.
I don't know if I could have my desk pointed so that I could see through into the hallway there.
No, that's why you had the blinds.
You did.
The door would be closed, the blinds would be shut.
Got it. So you were, for all intents and purposes, inaccessible except in the event of fire.
Yeah. So, this is why we weren't on set a lot. A lot of people are like, wow, what's it like being on set?
There's hardly any time.
There is no time, because you're upstairs either writing scripts, or you're prepping episodes, or you're in editing, working on your producer's cut, or you're watching mixes. So, being on set would have been a luxury, and we try to do it as much as possible, which is why it was always embarrassing for me at a certain point to go down the set, because even though I'd been with the show for multiple seasons, I didn't know all the crew member names because I just was never on set. I was the guy who, would be upstairs working all the time.
You did what you had to do.
Yeah.
I think it was you who mentioned over our dinner a couple of years ago for the Dialing Home interview that we did, that anytime you went down to the set, that's the amount of time that you would have to make up when you went back upstairs. Because it was like when you would go down to the set, it was almost like you were clocking out. Mm-hmm. But there were a certain number of hours to whatever you had to do every single day to get your work done. And there was just no other choice but to just look at it that way and get it out.
Yeah, especially true when, for a couple of years, we were producing 40 episodes of television, which is insane.
Mind-boggling.
Yeah.
Crazy. And to your earlier point about working 24 hours a day,
mm-hmm.
I guess there's just like a drip in your brain that you can't shut off when you're involved in a season of television, because I know what it's like for me when I have deadlines. There is a tightness in my gut that does not go away because there's an amount of appropriate anxiety that's healthy to make sure that you hit all your deadlines right. And I suspect that's, unless you're just like kind of a carefree person, it's like, you know what, I'm not going to worry about it. It'll get done one way or the other.
No.
It's there. That's always present
exactly
with you.
That. It's exactly that. And, as a writer, it's particularly frustrating because you can't really take time off. As you said, if you don't care, you can take time off. But if you're working under a looming deadline, you could be doing something completely different. Like I said, driving your car or out for a walk or out shopping, and you're, invariably running dialogue in your head. And that's how I write. I will run dialogue in my head, and the scene will take shape as a result of the back and forth of that dialogue. And you can do that anywhere. You can do that lying in bed at 3 a.m.
We're always having conversations with ourselves.
Yes.
It's a great way to try out, a scene.
Yeah. In fact, actually, that's my wife last night. I came in was like, I was in the shower and she was in the bedroom and she was like, did you say something to me while you were in the shower? I'm like, actually, no, I was writing dialogue.
Oh, God.
And maybe not in my head, out loud. Sometimes that will happen.
Yusufi wants to know, Joe, when can we expect another sci-fi show from you?
Hopefully sooner than later. I have actually two sci-fi shows, two time travel sci-fi shows. One of them, I keep mentioning, if you liked Window of Opportunity and if you watch Dark Matter, All the Time in the World, Isn't That a Paradox? Kind of the funny sci-fi. Timescape is a show for you. And then I'm working on another one with the executive producer of The Outpost, Doug Pascoe, and we and the amazing Kristen Menti. We have developed a time travel series that we were going to go out with in October, but because Hollywood shut down, we're going to have to push it off till January. So I'm working on that. I actually am working on two major sci-fi shows. I've actually been hired. It's contract work. It's not just me writing, but one crazy sci-fi series that combines gaming, anime, K-pop, and science fiction. So that's what I'm working on now. And I've got a near future Android murder mystery that is also next up on tap. I've got a really fun adaptation of a comic book with one of the major comic book publishers that I've been working on for a while. I've got something in the fantasy realm, which is a terrific book series that I can't say now because I haven't announced it publicly yet, but I had a conversation with the author last week and he's amazing and the books are amazing. And it's a very unique fantasy series that I've mentioned on my blog, I think more than once. So you can check out my blog too.
JosephMallozzi.com.
JosephMallozzi.com. And actually there's two comic book properties. One of them is a sci-fi property that I'm in talks with. So I've got like a kind of a lot going on. Oh, and also it's just so crazy. I mentioned the fact that it seems like I got a lot in the works, and I do, but you never know what's going to go. So, which is why you have to have all these balls in the air. And there was a script I wrote several years ago that I just kind of sent out on a lark a couple of months ago. I didn't think anything would come of it, and I just got an email earlier this week that was from a streamer that was like, "Hey, we're interested, to talk about this." And that one is a small town supernatural mystery series. So I mean, who knows what's going to go? My you always have your favorites. My always heart is with sci-fi, especially the kind of more humorous sci-fi. So Timescape is number one on my list, but who knows what will happen. So hopefully sooner than later, I would say. So by 2021, I'll be in a writer's room working on something.
My goodness, man. The bandwidth that it must take to manage the projects that you just said. I mean, there was like 5, 6, or 7 of them. How do you sleep? Yeah. How do you sleep? I mean, obviously you're not working full bore on all of them simultaneously. They're at various stages of.
Yes. Yeah. And the fact that, whenever I talk about this, I can feel the anxiety rising in me, because as I'm talking about this, I'm like, I really should be getting more work done on that pilot script, for instance.
Instead, I'm stuck with Dave.
Well, no, I'm not stuck with, but honestly, not when I'm not stuck with you, I'm basically researching my fantasy football or checking out the new sort of Korean horror series on Netflix.
I do have to say, with modern streaming and everything else, there is definitely a situation, I think, where we have more quantity than quality, but at the same time, these longer form novel length series that are coming out now are just some of the best entertainment that's ever been devised. Yeah. It really feels that way. So Chronos Chiron. Back in March, Joe gave out a paper of how they could bring back Dr. Weir, but never got a chance. Can you elaborate on this a little bit more?
That was the scene. So for San Diego Comic-Con, not the last one, but the one before, there was no last one. Like I said, the
last live one
2 years ago. Yeah.
2 years ago. Yeah.
We ended up doing a reading of Stargate excerpts from the Stargate Extinction script, the Stargate Atlantis, would have been the Stargate Atlantis movie. And, ever since we lost Weir, Elizabeth Weir, presumably lost Weir, in my mind, she was not dead, even though the Osiris basically told Shepard, "Oh, we killed her." I mean, are you going to take the word of your enemy? Of course they're not going to kill her. She's like a font of information. Mm-hmm. So they would have kept her in stasis on ice. And I always thought, well, how would I bring her back? And what I ended up doing was writing the scene for San Diego Comic-Con, the scene that I would have written to bring Weir back. And so that's what he's got. And I posted it on my blog somewhere, so you're gonna have to look that up as well.
Well, I just, because I remember being there and hearing that, it's like, as far as I'm concerned, this is canon. Like, full stop. Mm-hmm. That's it. She persists. Her human form persists in the universe. Right. It was too solid a character to just wipe out.
Right.
So, the Time Prophet, the in-jokes about MacGyver in Stargate. Did Rick have any input on putting those in, or did he just...
Absolutely. He had no input whatsoever in putting those in. In fact, I don't know if he didn't like them, to be honest with you.
I was going to ask. Yeah.
Yeah.
Who came up with Grell's line at the end, and what's your take on it? So I believe they're referring to 200. He has the quote from Isaac Asimov.
Yes, that was pure Brad. And you can tell it's Brad because Brad he does not only write science fiction, but he reads science fiction. And, obviously contemporary, but the classics as well, Asimov and Arthur C. Clarke, and I think we recently talked about Larry Niven and Jerry Pournelle. So yes, that was absolutely a Brad Wright line.
Kevin Leach, Sean Patrick Flannery's character, Orlin. Was it a scheduling conflict that he didn't return for season 10?
Yeah, I believe it was
just not interested.
No, I believe it was a scheduling conflict.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let me see here. E space TI.
Mm-hmm.
Joe, what are your tips for emerging sci-fi writers for getting a foot in the door into a writer's room as an assistant or something like that, with the view of gradually moving up the ranks?
Yeah. If you haven't had anything produced before, being an assistant would be the best way to get your foot in the door. There are the trades that list what productions are gearing up. So reach out to those productions, see if you can land your a position as an assistant, or maybe as even sort of front office staff. For me, with the advice I give first-time writers is to follow the path I took, which is kind of an atypical path, in that I actually got my foot in the door in animation writing. And animation companies tend to be more receptive of new writers. You get your foot in the door, you get to hone your craft, you get paid doing it, and then you can make the transition from animation to live action, which is what I did. Paul and I transitioned from writing for animation to writing for teen live action teen sitcom, to writing 1 hour action adventure, to ultimately landing on Stargate and working our way up. So there are the two ways to go about it. Also, make sure you have a great script. I would suggest two scripts: one spec script, which is obviously a script based on an existing series to demonstrate your ability to capture the tone and the voices of show, and also an original pilot.
Wow. Man, thank you for that clarification. Yeah. That's it's easy to look back, and go, this is my story. But this is a process that took years, just like any typical journey where you have the number of credits that you do, and you have to be willing to go on that journey as well and climb that mountain starting at the bottom.
Yeah.
So Redux wanted to know, where's the SG-1 and SGU season 2 Blu-rays? This is an MGM question.
Yeah, people ask me that all the time, and I always tell them this is a studio question. Sadly, I have nothing to do with that.
Yeah, well, SGU is at least available in high definition on the streaming sites. SG-1, there is a Blu-ray that actually just came out. And it is my understanding that it is legitimate, but it is an HD upres. I will post the link to it in the blog, or excuse me, in the YouTube link, so you guys can take a look at it for yourself. I mean, it's obviously not what I would have wanted, which would have been a full restoration.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, I'm fairly active on the Stargate subreddit, occasionally posting behind the scenes photos. And one of the fans had up-resed one of the episodes, one of the SG-1 episodes, and it looked amazing.
Really?
Yes. Yeah. It looked really good.
Yeah, if a lot of these studios don't get on board, the fans are going to start ahead of them. Have you seen the Rogue One deep fakes, where the deep fake technology was used instead of the CG that was adapted for Peter Cushing and for Carrie Fisher?
No.
They look better than the multi-million-dollar CG products.
Wow.
It's spooky how you could just apply this software.
Yes.
And it's better than what came out 4 years ago.
Yeah.
Jeez. Matthew Hall, thank you for writing the best show ever. You have helped many people and are very appreciated by us all.
Helping to write the best show ever. Thank you.
Akos Thomas Navaki. Why was the Gould Shiva changed in the script of Summit? I wasn't aware of that. Is that true?
Why was she changed?
Shiva. The
Gould
Shiva.
Changed to Kali?
Was it changed to Kali? Okay.
Maybe because
Shiva wasn't. I thought Shiva was benevolent.
Well, I think that's why maybe we did it, because Kali was a better bad than
Kali
Shiva.
was definitely a bad. For sure.
Yeah.
The Time Prophet. Joe, how do you keep writing without repeating yourself?
Oh that's a good question. I don't know how I managed to do it. I don't know. I mean, my mother says I am blessed with original ideas.
There you go.
And really what it comes down to is the characters, right? I mean, I always think back to Window of Opportunity when we first pitched Window of Opportunity, and Rob Cooper was like, no, change it to this, change it to this, change it to this. And ultimately, I ended up saying, well, you just want us to write Groundhog Day. And he's like, yeah,
just write it.
And
so you don't want me to do any work.
Yeah, we can't write Groundhog Day. But it became a fan favorite because, it was less to do with the premise. I mean, the premise was great, but it was because it was our characters. And you can be original if your characters are original, because you're always writing for unique voices. Like on Dark Matter, I ended up doing a time loop episode, and everybody's done time loop episodes, but it ended up again being a fan favorite because it was unique to our characters, to those characters. Yeah.
So at a certain point, you just kind of have to accept the fact that there are only like 9 or 10 story ideas in existence, and make the best darn show that you can with the best darn characters that you have.
Yeah, I think I want to say it was Hemingway. It was someone, one of the greats, once said that there are maybe a half dozen stories out there, and you just have to sort of. It's all a variation of these handful of stories. And I remember, I think in season 5 of Stargate, Paul and I were interviewed, and Paul said they're pretty much the same thing. There's only, X amount, a set amount of story, every story is being told. And the fans went berserk when they read that article, because they were like, you're saying that there's no original stories, and that's not true.
What they're saying.
Basically,
that's not what he's saying.
Well, actually, they for some reason, the quote was attributed to me. So I was the one who got raked over the coals. And I was like, well, I didn't see it, but regardless, it is true.
We have had long conversations about how fandom is a beast with many, many heads. Most of those heads, are cool and appreciative of the content, and are thankful to have access to you, who are willing to go into the dens where those beasts reside. And every once in a while you come across some who think that when you're shooting at a fan, you're shooting at them. So
that was another one I was going to bring up.
Homecoming, season 7.
Okay, all right. We'll hold on.
I'll never forget that.
Yeah.
I remember, that's not true.
Yeah, the fact that we would go through all the trouble of, okay, we got to put the fan in the scene, the mechanical fan in the scene. We have to have the bullet bounce off it. So that.
Joe, it's been a pleasure to have you back.
Oh, it's always a pleasure. Thank you so much.
It means so much to me. Thank you for putting up with my time change shenanigans and everything else. This will not happen again, I swear.
We got it done. It was great. I look forward to the next one.
You have a good holiday. We'll see you in 2021, okay?
All right.
Thank you so much, sir.
My dog. Take it
Sounds
easy, David.
good. Be well.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Joseph Mallozzi, everyone, on Dial the Gate. Questions for me. Ian, I know that one goal of Dial the Gate is to be an oral history of Stargate. That is still the intent here. To that effect, I'd love to see James Robbins, Mark Savella on the show, Brad Rhymes, and Rick Martin, editors. Are these folks people you'd be interested in having on? Absolutely. James Robbins, I messaged him a month and a half ago, and I have not heard back. So if anyone out there is in connection with production designer James Robbins, I would kill to have him on the show. It would be an absolute pleasure. We would have a lot to talk about. Mark Savella is someone that I would love to have on in the very near future as well. Brad Rhymes and Rick Martin. I really want to do like an editor panel as well as like a director panel. For sure. Watcher 652 vids. Why don't you have a Stargate that lights up? This is in reaction to your Enterprise. I would love to have a Stargate that lights up. I just don't have one. So there was someone who put out the SGU Stargate is my favorite gate. It's elegant. It's the lines are beautiful. The chevrons are white. There was one that someone put out with one that actually spins, and I would love just a static one that lights up and just sits on a base. Claire Burr, wondering about a Dial the Gate Discord server chat. Claire asked and answered. So Claire and I are working on that. I sent her an email. So a Dial the Gate Discord chat server may be in the cards here. Let me see here. Yeah, Matthew Hall asked for Joe to just, let me see here. Thank you for writing the best show ever. So we already answered that. Kevin Leach, how did you get into doing Stargate interviews in the first place? I made a phone call, and that was between season 7 and 8. I reached out to Amanda Tapping's agent and asked her to take my call. And within like a week or two, we had an audio interview and posted it up on Gate World. And that is my first or second or third interview for Gate World. So that was really the turning point. And so it was just a matter of continuing to do that since, and making connections with these people and raising Gate World's profile and moving everything forward. So, question for David: do you have any of Don's artwork? I don't. I don't have anything that Don made, unfortunately. I do have General Hammond's wedding ring from his deceased wife who died of cancer. So that's upstairs, and that's in my safe. So that's like I think that's my only piece of Don that I have is the wedding ring that he wore during production. Don's artwork is available at donsdavis.ca. And while we're mentioning websites, Joseph Mallozzi's website is at josephmallozzi.com. That's where his blog is posted. We have a sponsor. Dial the Gate has partnered with 3D Tech Pro for the month of December to give you a chance to get your very own desktop Stargate and customized ancient keychain. To enter to win these items, you need to use a desktop or laptop computer and visit dialthegate.com. Scroll down to submit trivia questions. Your trivia may be used in a future episode of Dial the Gate, either for our monthly trivia night or for a special guest to ask me in a round of trivia. There's 3 slots for trivia: 1 easy, 1 medium, and 1 hard. Only 1 needs to be filled in, but you're more than welcome to submit up to 3. Please note the submission form does not currently work on mobile devices. Your trivia must be received before January 1st, 2021. If you're the lucky winner, I'll be notifying you via your email right after the start of the new year to get your address and what word you want on your ancient keychain. Be sure to check out our partner's website for more Stargate-related merchandise at 3dtech.pro. And I think that I have artwork as well before we let you guys go. I do indeed. This is from guest artist David SD, and it is a 3D rendering of the Goa'uld space station from the Osiris system in Summit and Last Stand. And it's labeled Goa'uld Space Station, work in progress. David SD said, "I'm still alive, and currently I'm working on a Goa'uld space station." This is a few years old that this was posted. The one scene in the episode Summit almost finished the modeling part. This is amazing work, and that's something that I would love to be able to, a model that I would love to have behind me, sitting on some kind of like special like stand or whatever to keep it straight. But it's one of the coolest builds in the entire franchise. So thank you so much for joining us. Before I let you go, one last thing. If you like what you've seen in this episode, I would appreciate it if you click that like button. It really makes a difference with YouTube's algorithm and will definitely help the show grow its audience. Please also consider sharing this video with a Stargate friend. And if you want to get notified about future episodes, click the subscribe icon. If you plan to watch live, I recommend giving the bell icon a click so you'll be the first to know of any schedule changes, which will happen all the time, like it did today, except for today it was my fault, not Joe's. And bear in mind, clips from this live stream will be released over the course of the next several days and weeks on Dial the Gate and GateWorld.net's YouTube channels. We have 2 more shows coming up for you tomorrow. And the first one is going to be actor David Hewlett, Rodney McKay himself, and that is scheduled for 11 a.m. Pacific time, followed by Jacqueline Samuda at 1 p.m. Pacific time, near T. So come with your questions, and we will be having them answer them. So thank you so much for tuning in. My name is David Reed, and we will be seeing you on the other side.